Under the glowing twin moons of the planet Valara, the royal arena was filled with sound, roars, drums, and the metallic clank of armor. Thousands of alien warriors stood in line, each hoping to win the greatest honor of the century, lifting the Princess of Gravaris from her throne. The rule was simple. Whoever could lift her would earn her hand in marriage and the title of Champion of Worlds. But no one ever had. For 10 long years, every knight, beast, and champion had failed. Some broke their bones. Others fainted from the crushing force that surrounded her body. They said she was cursed, too heavy for any living being to lift. On her crystal throne, Princess Lyra sat silently. Her silver skin shimmered in the pale light, and her eyes glowed like frozen stars. She looked calm, but inside, she felt the same loneliness she had felt since childhood. Every day she watched strangers try to claim her. None ever saw her as a person. They only saw a challenge. The Grand Herald raised his voice. "Step forward, brave knights of Valara. Who will attempt the impossible today?" From the crowd came the sound of heavy footsteps, not armored but soft and uneven. The crowd parted, whispering in surprise. A man with oil-stained hands and a torn jacket walked through the line of armored warriors. His hair was messy, and a small wrench hung from his belt. "A human?" someone shouted. "What is he doing here?" another hissed. The man ignored the laughter. He was Ethan Cole, a mechanic from the human colonies. His ship had broken down nearby, and somehow, curiosity had brought him to the arena. He stood before the throne and looked up at the princess. His brown eyes were calm but curious, the eyes of someone who wanted to understand, not to conquer. Princess Lyra studied him carefully. "You are not a knight," she said softly. "No, Your Highness," Ethan replied. "I'm a mechanic." Laughter exploded around them. Even the king smirked. "And what does a mechanic think he can fix here?" the king asked mockingly. Ethan looked around at the shattered ground near the throne. Cracked stone, broken armor, burned markings. He stepped closer, ignoring the guard's warnings. "Maybe not fix," he said with a small grin, "but I can try." The guards crossed their spears, but the princess raised her hand. "Let him." Her voice was soft but commanding. For some reason she wanted to see what this strange human would do. Ethan slowly circled the throne. He placed his hand on the glowing floor and felt a strange pull, like gravity itself was alive. "It's not just weight," he murmured. "It's sadness." The princess blinked in surprise. "What did you say?" Ethan stood straight and met her eyes. "It's not a curse of strength, it's a curse of emotion. You don't want anyone close to you, do you?" For a moment, silence filled the arena. Even the wind seemed to stop. The princess's lips trembled, but she said nothing. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Ethan smiled gently. "Then let's start small," he said, gripping the edge of the throne. "Not to lift you, just to see if you want to move." The crowd leaned forward. He pressed his palms against the crystal seat, his arms shaking. At first, nothing happened. The gravity field pushed back, bending the air. The ground cracked beneath his boots. His muscles screamed. Yet, he didn't stop. "Come on," he whispered, almost kindly, as if speaking to a scared child. "You're not that heavy. You just think you are." A low hum filled the arena. The light under the throne flickered. For the first time in 10 years, the throne moved. Just an inch, but enough to make the entire crowd gasp. The king rose from his seat, furious. Impossible. But the princess's eyes widened in wonder. She could feel the pressure fading slightly, as if her heart itself had taken a breath after years of silence. Ethan fell to one knee, breathing hard, his hands smoking from the heat of the energy field. Yet he grinned. "Told you," he panted. "I fix things that others break." The crowd erupted, some in anger, some in awe. The princess stared at him with something she hadn't felt in years, hope. And somewhere deep beneath the throne, the ancient gravity engine hummed awake again. as if it had recognized its first true challenger. The next morning, the golden light of Valara's twin suns fell across the palace. Yet instead of celebration, the air was filled with anger. The king was furious. "How dare a human mock royal law?" he thundered. "He insulted our bloodline by touching the throne!" Guards dragged Ethan Cole into the royal courtyard. His hands were still burned from the night before, his clothes torn, but his eyes were calm. The crowd jeered at him, nobles in shining armor and servants who whispered that he would be executed. Princess Lyra stood beside her father, silent. Her heart was torn in two. The human had done what no one else could. He had moved her throne. Even more shocking, he had spoken to her like she was a person, not a trophy. The king lifted his staff. "This mechanic will serve as an example. Let no outsider touch the royal blood again." Before the soldiers could move, Lyra raised her voice. "Father, wait!" The crowd gasped. She had never interrupted him before. "He only touched the throne because I allowed it," she said. "If punishment is due, then let it fall on both of us." Her words sent a wave of whispers through the court. The king's face turned pale with rage. "You defend this creature?" Lyra looked at Ethan. "He is not a creature," she said softly. "He asked me something no one else did, if I wanted to be lifted." The king glared at Ethan. "And what did she say?" Ethan smiled faintly, his lips cracked. "She didn't need to. I already knew." "Enough," the king shouted. "Lock him away." Hours later, deep inside the stone dungeons, Ethan sat in silence. Water dripped from the ceiling. He leaned back against the wall and whispered to himself, "Well, that could have gone better." A sudden sound of footsteps echoed. He looked up and froze. The princess stood before his cell, her gown hidden under a dark cloak. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here," Ethan said quietly. "Neither should you," she replied. "Yet here we are." He gave a small laugh. "So what now? Come to thank me for breaking royal furniture?" Her expression softened. "You didn't break anything. You freed something, for a moment. When you touched the throne, I felt lighter." Ethan tilted his head. "Then it's not a curse. It's something emotional, something that reacts to your mind." She nodded slowly. "I was told it's a punishment. The throne binds me to my duty, to ensure no one unworthy can claim me." Or, Ethan said, "It keeps you prisoner while everyone pretends it's honor." His words struck her like lightning. She had never dared to think that way. He stood up, gripping the iron bars. "I can fix it," he said. "If I can reach the throne's core again, I can adjust its energy flow. But I need to understand how it's connected to you." Lyra's breath quickened. "You would risk your life again just to free me?" Ethan shrugged. "That's what mechanics do. We fix things, even when we're not asked to." For a moment, they just looked at each other, a human behind bars and a princess bound by invisible chains. Then she whispered, "I'll help you." That night, thunder rolled across Valara. While the guards changed shifts, a shadow slipped through the corridors, the princess leading a human prisoner through hidden passages. When they reached the upper balcony overlooking the sleeping city, Lyra stopped. "If they catch us, they'll kill you," she said. Ethan smiled. "Then let's not get caught." He looked out at the glowing towers and misty clouds. "Tell me, princess, when was the last time you left this palace?" She hesitated. "Never." He turned to her with a grin. "Then tonight's your first adventure." Lyra's heart raced, not from fear but from something she hadn't felt in years. Excitement. For the first time, she was not the unliftable princess. She was just Lyra, and beside her the human who didn't kneel was ready to break every rule in her world. The hidden passage opened into the ancient vaults below the palace, a place even the king feared to enter. Dust floated in the air, like tiny stars, and the sound of humming machines echoed from the dark. The walls were carved with symbols from a forgotten age, glowing faintly in shades of blue and silver. Ethan's eyes widened. "This place, it's older than your palace." Lyra nodded. "Older than our empire." My ancestors built it long before I was born. They said it holds the secret of our gravity. They walked deeper until they reached a great metal door sealed with strange runes. Ethan knelt, studying it like a puzzle. Magnetic lock, energy sensitive, responds to emotion, just like you. Lyra tilted her head. Me? He looked up at her. Your energy field isn't just physical, princess. It reacts to what you feel. Fear makes it heavier. Hope makes it lighter. Lyra stared at the door, silent. Then that means... He smiled softly. You're the key. Hesitant, she placed her hand on the glowing symbols. The runes flared to life, and with a deep rumble, the door slid open. Inside was a circular chamber filled with old machines, crystals, and a single glowing sphere pulsing like a heartbeat. Ethan stepped closer. The core generator, he whispered. This is what ties your body to the planet's gravity field. Lyra's voice trembled. I was told it was divine punishment for rejecting the warlord of Titanus. He wanted to marry me. I said no. And soon after, I couldn't move from my throne. They said his curse bound me forever. Ethan frowned, walking around the core. No curse, just technology weaponized by emotion. Someone linked your nervous system to this machine. Her eyes widened. But why? He touched a panel, brushing away centuries of dust. Control. If you were bound, your people would never rebel. You'd always stay on that throne. A symbol they could worship, not a woman who could change things. Lyra's knees weakened. All this time, my suffering kept their power alive. Ethan looked at her, her silver eyes now glistening with tears. Lyra, the field grows stronger when you feel trapped. But when you smiled yesterday, even a little, it weakened. She touched her chest, feeling the faint pulse beneath her skin. So my heart decides the weight of my world, he nodded. Exactly. And I think I can reverse it. Lyra stepped closer. How? By sinking your emotions to the core, not through pain, but through peace. You need to feel free before I can change the energy flow. She gave a small, trembling laugh. Freedom is something I've never known. Ethan smiled. Then we'll build it one heartbeat at a time. For hours he worked, his hands covered in glowing dust and faint burns. Wires sparked, circuits hummed, and the air thickened with static. Lyra watched him. This fragile human who dared to fix the throne that had enslaved her people for generations. As he worked, he spoke softly. Back home, I used to repair ships. Broken engines, melted cores. People called me crazy for trying to fix things that were beyond saving. But I always believed. Nothing is truly broken, just misunderstood. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. And what am I, Ethan? Broken or misunderstood? He looked up, meeting her eyes. Both. But that's what makes you worth saving. A faint smile touched her lips. Her first true smile in years. The moment it appeared, the gravity around them softened. The floor stopped trembling. The glowing sphere flickered gently like a candle's flame. Ethan blinked. There, did you feel that? She nodded, amazed. It responded to me. But before he could continue, a loud alarm blared. Red lights filled the chamber. The door behind them sealed shut. Lyra's face went pale. They found us. Ethan clenched his jaw, grabbing his wrench. Then let's make this count. The ground began to shake as armored guards stormed down the tunnels. The human and the princess stood side by side, one holding tools, the other holding hope, ready to face the empire that had kept her in chains. The alarm echoed through the underground vault like thunder. Red lights pulsed across the ancient walls, and the humming of the gravity core grew louder, unstable, angry. Ethan tightened his grip on his wrench. We've got company. Princess Lyra turned toward the sealed door, her silver hair reflecting the crimson light. They'll destroy everything. They can't know the truth. Heavy boots pounded from the corridors above. The king's soldiers were coming, armored giants carrying plasma pikes that glowed white-hot. Ethan scanned the chamber, his mind racing. We need time. I can stabilize the core, but if it overloads, it could take the whole palace down. Lyra finished, her voice calm despite the danger. He looked at her with admiration. You're not afraid? Her lips curved into a faint, defiant smile. For once, I'm not sitting on a throne waiting to be saved. The first wave of guards burst in, shouting orders. Ethan ducked behind a fallen pillar, using his wrench to spark a surge in the gravity core's defense field. The air shimmered, and suddenly the guards floated upward, their heavy armor weighing nothing. They shouted in panic, spinning helplessly in midair. Lyra raised her hand, focusing her energy. The air around her glowed bright blue, and with a single motion she pulled them down with invisible force. The floor cracked under the impact. Silence followed. Ethan blinked. "Remind me never to make you angry." Lyra gave a short laugh. "I wasn't angry, just done being weak." They rushed through the passageways, heading toward the upper palace. The entire structure trembled from the unstable gravity core. Statues fell, crystal windows shattered, and the royal banners burned in the electric wind. When they reached the throne hall, the king was already waiting. He stood beside his guards, his golden armor gleaming under the flickering lights. "Traitor," he spat at Lyra. "You bring shame to your bloodline." Lyra stood tall. "You chained me, father. You called it duty. You made me a prisoner so your throne would never be questioned." "Silence," the king roared, slamming his staff to the floor. "That machine binds our world's power. You would destroy it for a human?" Ethan stepped forward, eyes locked on the king. "Not destroy and fix. You've been feeding on her pain to hold your empire together. But you forgot something. Humans fix what others break," the king sneered. "Then fix this," he hissed, swinging his staff. A blast of energy shot forward. Ethan jumped aside, the beam scorching the marble floor. Lyra reacted instantly, lifting her hand. The gravity around the king twisted, bending his attack back toward him. He stumbled as his own energy struck the throne, shattering it into glowing shards. The entire hall shook. The air grew heavier, thicker. The palace began to sink under its own weight. "Ethan," Lyra shouted, panic rising in her voice. "I need to disconnect the core." He yelled back, sprinting toward the wall panel. "But I'll need your help. You have to control your emotions." "I'm trying," she cried, gripping her chest as the pressure around her intensified. He reached the panel and began to work, sparks flying as he tore out wires and rewired ancient circuits. "Breathe, Lyra. Don't think about fear, think about freedom." Her mind filled with memories. The cold throne, the endless isolation, the faces of men who tried to claim her. But then she saw him, the strange human who never bowed, who smiled even when the world mocked him. Her breathing slowed. The blue glow around her turned soft and warm. "Now," Ethan shouted. She extended her hand toward the broken throne, channeling every emotion, sadness, anger, hope, into one clear feeling. Freedom. A wave of light exploded through the hall. The walls trembled, the energy surged upward, and the cursed gravity field shattered like glass. The king fell to his knees, gasping as the power he had stolen was ripped from him. Ethan shielded his eyes as the energy faded. The throne, the symbol of her bondage, lay in ruins. Lyra stood in the middle of it, glowing softly, her chains gone. She looked at him with tears and wonder. "You did it?" she whispered. Ethan smiled, exhausted but alive. "No, princess. We did." Outside, the skies of Valara burst into dawn. For the first time in centuries, the palace no longer floated above its people. It stood with them. Smoke drifted through the shattered throne hall. Cracked marble reflected the dim red light of Valara's twin suns. The once glorious banners of the royal house now lay torn across the floor. Ethan Cole stood near the broken core console, his hands trembling, his face streaked with soot. Sparks hissed from the destroyed circuits behind him. The princess stood at his side, glowing faintly with silver light. But their victory was short-lived. A slow clap echoed through the chamber. The king of Gravaris stepped forward, his golden armor blackened by ash but his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "You've only broken the balance that holds this world together." Lyra turned to him, her voice calm but firm. "This world was never balanced. It was ruled by fear." The king raised his staff. "You speak like a human, weak, defiant, blind to consequence." Ethan stepped between them. "Maybe, but at least humans learn from what breaks them." The king's fury erupted. He slammed the staff down and a surge of gravity energy tore through the air like a storm. The entire hall buckled. Ethan was thrown across the room, crashing into a pillar. His vision blurred, his ribs aching. Lyra screamed, "Stop! You'll destroy everything." Her father's voice thundered back. "If I cannot rule this world, then no one will." The cracked gravity core behind the throne flared again, out of control. Shards of crystal floated upward as the room bent under invisible weight. Guards fled, crushed under their own armor. The king, drunk with power, turned the field toward his daughter. Lyra fell to her knees, pinned by unbearable force. The tiles beneath her cracked. "Father, please," he sneered. "You were born to be a symbol, not a rebel." Ethan crawled forward through the debris, gasping for breath. Every muscle screamed in pain, but his eyes stayed locked on Lyra. The field's pressure was so strong that even the air felt solid. He could barely move his arms, and yet he kept crawling. "Ethan, don't," Lyra cried. "You'll die." He grinned weakly. "Maybe, but I said I'd fix things." With one final push, he forced himself to his feet. The gravity tried to crush him, but he leaned forward step by step. The hall seemed to stretch endlessly, his boots cracking the marble with each motion. Even the king stopped, his expression changing from arrogance to disbelief. "Impossible." Ethan's body trembled violently. The veins in his neck bulged. The air shimmered as he reached Lyra, and with a deep breath he placed one arm under her. Then, defying every law of nature, he lifted her. Gasps filled the room. The gravity waves shattered around them like invisible glass. The king stumbled backward, his power collapsing. The cursed field broke completely, vanishing into a silent flash of blue light. Ethan stood in the center of the hall, holding the alien princess in one arm, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Around him, soldiers dropped their weapons and knelt, Lyra's eyes filled with tears. You carried me." Ethan smiled faintly, his voice barely a whisper. "Told you I could fix it." The king tried to rise again, but the ground beneath him gave way. The throne cracked open, swallowing him in a burst of light and stone. The age of Gravaris ended in that instant. Silence followed. Dust fell like snow. Lyra still lay in Ethan's arm, her body light as air now, her curse finally gone. He looked at her, his voice rough. "You're free." She touched his face, her silver eyes soft with gratitude. "No one has ever carried me before. Not even my people." Ethan chuckled weakly. "Guess humans are built different." She smiled, but tears slid down her cheeks. "You weren't just strong, Ethan. You believed I wasn't a burden." He lowered her gently to her feet, his knees shaking. "You never were." As dawn broke through the shattered ceiling, sunlight bathed them both, a human covered in oil and blood, and a princess reborn in light. The world of Valara had witnessed something it would never forget. The day a human carried a world's weight with one arm, and made it light again. The light of dawn spilled across the broken palace, touching the dust and smoke that still hung in the air. The once mighty hall of Gravaris now stood silent, the throne shattered, the king gone, and the empire trembling in awe. In the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, the human mechanic who had done the impossible. His body was bent, his shirt torn, his arms trembling, yet he still held Princess Lyra, who glowed faintly in the soft morning light. The soldiers who had once obeyed the king now stood frozen, watching in disbelief. Some fell to their knees. Others dropped their weapons. None dared to speak. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "He's not a warrior," she whispered, her words echoing across the hall. "He's a human, who carried what no one else could." Ethan smiled faintly. "And you're not a curse, princess. Just someone who needed to be seen." Then his strength finally failed him. His knees buckled and he collapsed to the floor. "Ethan," Lyra shouted, catching him before he hit the ground. She placed her hand on his chest. His heart was still beating, but weak and slow. His breathing came in rough gasps. She looked around desperately. "Get a medic," she screamed. "Now!" But no one moved. The soldiers only stared, unsure if they were witnessing a miracle or the end of one. Lyra gritted her teeth. "Then I'll save him myself." She tore a glowing shard from the broken throne, a fragment of the old gravity core. Cradling it in her hand, she whispered the ancient codes of her ancestors. Blue light surrounded them both, wrapping Ethan's body in a gentle pulse of energy. The palace trembled again, but this time not from violence, from rebirth. Ethan opened his eyes weakly. "What are you doing?" Lyra's voice shook. "Sharing my life force. You gave me freedom. I'll give you strength," he tried to protest. "That's too much." "Quiet," she said softly, a small smile on her lips. "Let me fix something for once." Her light flowed into him like warmth after winter. The burns on his hands faded. The color returned to his face. His breathing steadied. When he sat up, he saw her glow fading slightly. "Lyra, you'll weaken yourself." She touched his cheek gently. "I've been heavy all my life, Ethan. For once, let me feel light." Outside, the people of Valara gathered below the palace ruins. They looked up at the balcony where their princess appeared, standing beside the human who had changed their fate. She raised her voice, carried by the wind. "People of Gravaris, the throne that chained us is no more. Today a human freed your princess, and not with power but with kindness," the crowd murmured, astonished. "A human? A mechanic?" Lyra continued, her tone proud and steady. "He carried me when no one else could, not because I was light, but because his heart was stronger than gravity." Ethan tried to step back, uncomfortable with the attention, but she caught his arm. "Stay," she whispered. "They need to see you." The crowd slowly began to cheer. One voice shouted, "Long live the Queen!" Another cried, "Honor to the human mechanic." Soon thousands of voices joined, a roar that echoed across the skies. Ethan looked down, overwhelmed. "I'm no hero," he muttered. Lyra smiled. "That's why you are one." As the day turned to night, fires of celebration lit up the city. Songs spread across the streets. Songs about the man who lifted the unliftable princess. In the quiet of the restored hall, Ethan sat beside Lyra, who now wore no crown, only a simple silver band around her wrist. "Guess I broke more than your throne," he joked softly. She laughed. "You broke an empire and a curse." He looked out at the stars where distant ships glittered. "Think they'll believe it?" She leaned against his shoulder. "They'll tell it for generations." And as the moons rose over Valara, their light fell on the two figures, a human who carried a world, and a queen who finally learned how to stand. A year had passed since the day the human carried the princess, a day that became legend across 100 worlds. The throne of Gravaris was gone, but in its place stood something greater, a wide open courtyard filled with people of every species, working, laughing, building together. The new queen, Lyra of Valara, ruled not from above her people, but among them and by her side always was the human who refused to kneel, Ethan Cole, the mechanic who had lifted a world. The morning sun glowed warm over the rebuilt palace. The sound of engines and laughter echoed through the air. Ethan crouched beside a hovering transport, grease on his hands, a grin on his face. "Still fixing things even as royal advisor?" Lyra teased, standing behind him with her silver cloak fluttering in the breeze. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "Old habits. Machines are easier to understand than people." She knelt beside him, her luminous eyes soft. "And yet you fixed both." He smiled faintly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Not fixed, princess. Just help them stop breaking." Lyra tilted her head, pretending to think. Maybe I should have you fix me again. I still wake up feeling heavy some mornings." Ethan chuckled. "That's not gravity, Lyra. That's what happens when you carry responsibility." She smiled, but her gaze turned distant. "I still dream of that day. The fire, the throne, my father's voice." He reached out, resting a hand over hers. "Then remember what came after, the silence, the light, the first breath of freedom." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of oil and flowers through the air, an oddly perfect mix of machine and life. That evening, the great plaza filled with thousands. Lanterns floated in the air like small suns. It was the festival of freedom, the first of its kind. Children painted tiny stars on their faces. Old warriors told stories of the human who defied gravity. Lyra stood on the central platform, her voice amplified by soft energy waves. "Once, we built thrones to make ourselves feel powerful," she said. "But thrones only make walls. Today we build bridges instead." The crowd cheered. She turned to Ethan, who stood a few steps behind her, arms crossed awkwardly, clearly not used to being watched by thousands. Lyra extended her hand toward him. "Come," she said. He hesitated. "I'm not royalty." Her smile was pure mischief. "Neither am I anymore." As he joined her, the crowd erupted in applause. Lyra looked at him with warmth that no title could define. For the first time in our history, a human stands beside a queen, not as a servant, but as an equal. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Careful. They'll start asking if we're..." She cut him off with a smile. Let them ask. Later that night, as the stars reflected in the palace lake, Ethan sat beside Lyra on the marble steps. The festival music drifted faintly through the distance. He broke the silence first. You know, back home they used to say love makes people lighter. Never thought it was literal until I met you. Lyra laughed softly, the sound like wind through glass. And they say humans exaggerate everything. He smiled. Maybe, but tell me, do you still feel heavy? She looked at him for a long time before answering. Only when you're far away. Ethan's grin faded into something gentle, real. Then I'll stay close. Can't risk another gravity surge. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You're still my mechanic. And you, he murmured, are still my impossible fix. When dawn came, the twin suns rose again over a world reborn. From orbit, Valara shimmered brighter than ever, no longer bound by gravity or pride, but lifted by something stronger, and across the galaxy, travelers spoke of the legend, how a human once lifted the unliftable princess, not with power, not with might, but with love that made even a world feel light.